we have, let's see, x squared minus 15 equals a negative 2x, at least to start. So let's take a look at problem C. Problem C, we have x squared minus 15 equals negative 2x. Remember, when we have anything bigger than just an x, when we've got an x squared term, we need to set it equal to 0. So that means I want to get rid of this negative 2x and move it to the other side. How am I going to do that? I can't just move it. I need to actually do this mathematically by adding 2x to both sides, and that will actually move the negative 2x from one side to the other, because now I'll have an x squared plus 2x minus 15 now equals 0. Now, once that we have that it equals 0, now I can just go to factoring. So, how do I factor this guy? Well, notice that they don't have anything in common between all three terms, which means I am looking at AC method. Well, my A, which is hidden, is a 1, so it'll be 1 times something. My B is positive 2, and my C is negative 15, so my AC is 1 times negative 15, which is a negative 15. And I need two factors of negative 15 that are going to add up to my middle term, which is a positive 2x. Well, what adds up to a positive 2 is a positive 5 and a negative 3. So what that lets me do is break down that middle term, that 2x, that positive 2x, into a positive 5x and a negative 3x. The first term, the x squared, will stay the same. The last term, the negative 15, will also stay the same. And let's be careful not to lose the other side of the equation, that we equal 0, because we're getting solutions for x. Now what? Now we have 4 terms. Now we can do our grouping. What do the first two have in common? Well, they both have an x. So let's plot an x and then from each piece, and that will leave me with leftovers of an x plus 5. Now the second two, we have a 3x and a negative 15. Well, also notice the first term is negative, so I'm actually going to factor out a negative. And what do they both have in common? Well, they have a 3 and a 15, so they're both divisible by 3. So let's factor out the negative 3. Well, factoring out the negative and the 3 will just leave me with an x in the first term. Be careful, factoring out the negative will turn this negative back into a positive. Negative 3 divides into negative 15 as a positive 5. And don't forget my other side, it still equals 0. Just like the rest of the material in this section, the reason why we know we are right on track is because we have a matching x plus 5. Remember that we can factor out the matching x plus 5, just like before. And then our leftovers will go inside of another set of parentheses. The leftovers are the x minus 3. And we still equal 0. Don't want to lose that this is an equation and we actually need solutions. Once it's factored like this and equals 0, then we can talk about breaking this down a little bit more by setting each piece equal to 0 once it's factored. So we'll start out by taking our first piece, the x plus 5, and setting that equal to 0. And we'll also set the second piece, the x minus 3, the second piece, equal to 0 as well, to get our two answers. Well, on the first one, all we need to do to solve for x is subtract 5 from both sides, and that will give us that x equals negative 5. And on the second one, we just need to add 3 to both sides to solve it, and that will give us an x equals positive 3. And those are our two answers. Either x is going to equal negative 5 will make our equation 0, or x equals 3 will also make our equation 0. But that's it. And we are done. Now let's take a look at problem D. In problem D, we have 3x squared plus 9x plus 30 equals 2x squared minus 2x. So just like the other ones, we have a problem that our highest term has an x squared in it, which means for me to solve this, I need to get everything on the same side so that the other side is a 0. So I need to get rid of the 2x squared and move it to the other side by doing the opposite. We'll subtract a 2x squared. And I need to get rid of the negative 2x by doing its opposite and adding a 2x to the other side. I always make sure I put them underneath the like terms like I did here so I know and I remember that I can only add these if they're like terms. So now I can go ahead and add the 3x squared. The 3x squared minus 2x squared will just give me a 1x squared. The 9x plus 2x will give me an 11x plus 30. Now the other side, because everything canceled out, is just a 0. So remember, once it equals 0 and all the variables on one side, now we can factor. So how do we factor something like this? We'll remember it's set up for AC method. My A, B, and C are already here. So I'm going to start with my A times C, which is 1 times 30, which is 30. And I'll need two factors of 30 that add up to our middle term. Our middle term is a positive 11. So what numbers multiply together to give me 30 but add up to positive 11? And that's a 6 and a 5. So 6 times 5 does give me the 30, but it also adds up to the 11 I want. So what this lets me do is split up that 11x into our two pieces with the 6 and the 5. It will split it up into a 6x and a 5x. Remember my first piece, the x squared, stays the same, and the 30 stays the same. Remember the 6x was a positive 6x, so I'll put a little plus out in front. Now we've got 4 terms, so we can do grouping. What do the first two have in common? They both have an x. So if I pull out an x from both pieces, I'll still have an x plus 6. Now looking at the second two pieces, I have a plus I can bring down, and they're both divisible by 5. So factoring out or dividing out a 5 will leave me with an x plus 6. And this is perfect because I have a matching piece now, the x plus 6, that I can factor out. So let's factor out our matching x plus 6. And one of my leftovers will go inside of their own set of parentheses. It's an x plus 5. And I always go back and stop at this point and look at my original equation because it's very easy to forget that, hey, I had an equal to here, which means I lost my equation. So I should be equaling 0. So let's actually put that back in there. Remember that this should all be equaling 0. It's very easy to accidentally lose it because I should have answers for x. I'm not done. So remember, what do we do next? We got to take each of the pieces and set them equal to 0. So we've got our x plus 6 that has to get set equal to 0 first. And then we'll set our other piece, the x plus 5, equal to 0. And let's see what kind of answers we get. Subtracting 6 from both sides, we get x equals a negative 6 on the first one. And subtracting a 5 from both sides on the second one, we get an x equals negative 5. So we get two answers, x equals negative 6 or x equals negative 5. Either one will make our equation equal to 0. And we're done.